welcome back to the cave. My name's Jeff. Today I want to talk again about something kind of books or magazines that are not fiction, but are nonfiction and related to television, classic television. In this case, I want to talk about a company called ITC. Now, ITC doesn't really exist anymore, at least not in the same sense as it was, but for many years, from the mid-50s up until the early 80s, ITC was a going concern, and they produced not only some live-action movies later in that time period, but especially many famous TV shows, action, adventure, science fiction, variety, etc. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this particular volume, although it's great. This is Cult TV, the Golden Age of ITC, and Robert Sellars is the writer, and you'll notice there it has a foreword by Sir Roger Moore and an afterword by Jerry Anderson. Now, if those names ring a bell, Roger Moore, of course, played James Bond in several movies from the 70s through the early 80s, mid-80s. And, of course, he played the Saint first, which more about that later. And Jerry Anderson is the creator of the Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, U.F.O, Space 1999, along with his wife Sylvia Anderson. Yes, ITC put out all of those shows and many more. ITC was the brainchild, the company owned by Sir Lew Grade. Now, Sir Lew Grade was a former dancer and music hall performer who he became an agent, then became a producer, and became basically a mogul, the old kind, chewing the cigar, handshake deals. By all accounts, he was a consummate salesman, sold a lot of his series that he produced for ITC, through ITC overseas to America and other colonies and other countries. But he was also, by all accounts, a straight shooting guy, a no BS sort of guy, and if he made a deal with you, he would stick to that deal. Very old school style. And this book, it's a really good book. It's really entertaining, fun to read, heavily researched with scads of quotes from, actors, principals, guest stars, writers, directors, producers, stunt performers, etc. of these different TV shows. But it doesn't cover every one of these. Some notable exceptions are overlooked, but it does cover the majority of TV series that ITC produced. The average American watches something on a British show on TV, they assume it's made at the BBC. And a lot of shows were produced for the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, but many were not. Many were produced and made for the rival, the commercial network ITV. Independent television production, I believe is what that is. And ATV, so ITV was made up in several regions, had their own, version of ITV. There was Granada that produced the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes series. There was Southern Television. There was, Welsh version of it. There was Midlands. There was London Weekend Television. There was Yorkshire. There were scads of them. And ATV was one of those. And Sir Lew Grade produced lots of shows that went on ITV and other ITV regions, and then were sold on to the rest of the world through ITC. And that was my gateway drug into British television, really. I remember the spinning ITC logo from the 70s and 80s in the States, before shows like The Muppet Show and The Saint that were aired in syndication. And I, immediately thought, what is this? It's strange, it's interesting, it's fresh. And that has since led me on, especially over the last decade and a half or so, of really getting into and collecting on DVD and Blu-ray a lot of shows, programs, TV programs as the Brits would call them, that were produced by ITC. Now, you are going to recognize some of these titles if you're a fan of classic television, I guarantee. Some of the programs that they created, Sir Lew Grade's ITC created. We have the old Swashbuckler series from back in the mid to late 50s, The Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Richard Green, The Adventures of Sir Lancelot, starring William Russell, The Buccaneers, which I believe star, I'm remembering correctly, Robert Shaw, Quint from Jaws. The Adventures of William Tell, H.G. Wells' Invisible Man. But here are where the really big ones start to kick in. Danger Man, or Secret Agent, as it was known in the United States, starring Patrick McGoohan as a special agent for the British government. Excellent show. The Saint with Roger Moore, Patrick McGoohan, who went on to play The Prisoner, right? And they also produced The Prisoner, okay? We have all of the Super Marionation shows from Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, the Supercar, Fireball XL5, Stingray, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Joe 90, The Secret Service, etc., right? We have Man in the Suitcase, which is one of the best ITC action man shows that probably isn't as well known as it should be. The Prisoner, of course, right? Very, very famous, perhaps one of the most famous of all ITC shows. And then we have The Champions, Department S, Randall and Hopkirk, Deceased. That's a London-based detective show where one of the detective partners is a ghost who assists his still living partner. U.F.O, the very kind of sexy, stylish late 60s, early 70s show. And Space 1999, shortly thereafter, which ran for a couple of seasons. And Jason King was spun off from Department S. The Persuaders, another Roger Moore series co-starring Tony Curtis, big Hollywood star Tony Curtis. Quite often Lou Grade would try to bring American stars over, like he did for The Baron with Steve Forrest, who would go on to star in the 70s TV series SWAT. Right? Then we have several other kinds of shows. Thriller, this is not the Boris Karloff thriller from the early 60s. This is the British thriller produced by Brian Clemens, the one of the key creators of the original The Avengers. I don't mean the comics Avengers. I mean Steed and Mrs. Peel, The Avengers. The Zoo Gang, based on a Paul Gallico novel. The Muppet Show, of course, one of the most famous ITV shows. The original Muppet Show, which ran for 5 seasons, produced by Jim Henson, of course. Jesus of Nazareth, that miniseries starring Robert Powell as Jesus. The Return of the Saint, where Ian Ogilvy takes over from Roger Moore in a more gritty late 70s version of the Saint. Sapphire and Steel, which had Joanna Lumley and David McCallum as odd kind of outer space agents who are agents of time who come to Earth when some force is ripping through time and affecting life on Earth, and they come to try to fix it. Very weird, creepy show. And then there's also Sir Francis Drake, Gideon's Way, which is an excellent police procedural filmed on location in London in the early 60s. I mentioned The Baron already, Strange Report, The Adventurer, and Hammer House of Horror, among several others. The Sentimental Agent, Man of the World, The Four Just Men. List goes on and on. A huge array of great classic TV shows, most of them in the crime, drama, detective, spy, espionage, adventure, some science fiction, or with science fiction elements like The Champions, which are 3 kind of NATO agents who, through a series of events which I won't go into detail here, crash land in the Himalayas, and a hidden race of people help repair their bodies and imbue them with kind of superpowers. Very cool variety of shows. Usually always had great theme music, really memorable opening credit sequences, and pretty slick. They were all filmed on, or almost all of them. There were a few later ones in the 70s where they cheaped out and filmed them on 16 millimeter, like a lot of other British TV shows at the time. But generally speaking, all of these shows were, splashed out and filmed on 35 millimeter. And that means that they have much higher video quality. And when they're restored to Blu-ray, they dazzle, like The Prisoner, like The Persuaders. I have a lot of these shows on Blu-ray and the rest on DVD. And again, this is a very fun, excellent overview. It doesn't go into huge detail on each series, but it's a really good resource. And again, Robert Sellars has written some other interesting film, biography, and television books. And this was published from Plexus in London in the year 2006. What a lot of people describe as the guru of ITC, that is Jaz Wiseman. He worked with a lot of the, people who made these series and recorded commentary tracks back in the DVD days for Network, predominantly for Umbrella in an Australian DVD retailer and producer. He also worked on some of the British Avengers DVD and Blu-ray releases. He is an acknowledged expert on ITC programming. He has a huge collection of stills, behind-the-scenes memos, magazines and books that were published in other countries. These shows, including especially shows like The Persuaders or The Saint, were huge around the world. Even if they didn't, do so well in their chosen in the United States market, which is where Lou Grade always tried to sell his shows before they were even made. And he had lots of friends in the United States, and so some of these shows would appear on networks like ABC and CBS and NBC. Very few of them ran very long. Quite often he would want to have a series produced for anywhere from 26 to 30 episodes and then do something completely new, a new whole series. Only a couple of them were huge successes, I guess, to get multiple seasons beyond 2 seasons, and that is the Saint, of course, which aired for over 110 episodes, I believe, a lot in black and white with some in color, and of course Secret Agent or Danger Man, as it was known in Britain and other parts of the world, which also I had one season of 39 half-hour episodes, and then 3 or 4 seasons of or series of hour-long episodes. Those were 2 of the biggest successes, of course, of ITC, and the Muppet Show, obviously. Anyhow, Jaz Wiseman had published a very cool kind of fanzine called The Morning After. I have several editions of that around here. I somehow can't find them. They're somewhere here, but I haven't been able to track them down. Very good, photos and press clippings and all sorts of things. So Jaz Wiseman has created this podcast, which is highly recommended, called ITC Entertained the World. He's also put out a magazine with some other experts that he involved. ITC Entertained the World magazine. It's got some really cool articles and nice art. So I thought I'd do a little quick flip through this. It's not new exactly. Of course, it's 4 years old now almost. November 2021. There should be a second issue coming at some point, perhaps later this year or early next. This is an expensive endeavor and might, this is a labor of love from Jaz and the other participants. And so whether the second one will actually happen, I'm not sure. I hope it does. But this entails a lot of the remastering in HD for both television airing and eventual Blu-ray release, etc., of a lot of these series, as well as interviews with producers, writers, actors, etc. So let's take a little quick look at this inside. Okay, let's take a look at this bad boy. So here we have John Gregson and Alexander Davion as Commander Gideon of Scotland Yard and his chief superintendent or chief inspector, I forgot the exact rank of his assistant there, from Gideon's Way. A lovely color photo there. This is a black and white series, police procedural based off of Gideon novels by John Creasy, writing as J.J. Merrick. It was also made in a film. The same character was featured in the film Gideon of Scotland Yard by John Ford in the 50s with Jack Hawkins playing Gideon. But in this case, John Gregson, who was a very well-respected British actor, of the movie actor at the time, took over the lead role in this series. And this is a really good series. I'd say it's the British equivalent of the Naked City, if you know that classic series from Sterling Siliphant back in the 60s, early 60s, late 50s. Kind of hard-hitting, gritty stories of various juvenile delinquents, killers, criminals, gangsters, etc. And almost like, I guess you could say, a kind of anthology show in a lot of ways, with the through line being the investigations of Gideon and his team of detectives in London. Anyway, here we have some advertisements before Network. There was a great DVD and Blu-ray releasing company in England called Network Distributing, and they paid for a lot of remastering and came out with these really nice special editions of all kinds of ITC products. Sadly, they went out of business a few years ago, and some other entities have since kind of taken over, like Imprint Via Vision in Australia. Old Gold Media has re-released some of their material in the UK. Anyway, this is Fireball XL5 and Supercar advertisement for their special edition, which had like little records of the theme music and booklets and all sorts of cool info. These were not cheap sets, those, and I don't have any of those because I'm not as huge a fan of those puppet shows from Jerry and Sylvia Anderson. I have a couple. I have Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons and Joe 90. Very cool. A lot of TLC went into making the miniatures and the props and filming these, and the music, everything is quite interesting. Then we have Jaz Wiseman himself, who is the editor and designer. And then I have a list of writers: Rick Davey, who runs the Prisoner Appreciation Society, I believe, and Rodney Marshall, Andrew Pixley, who writes a lot of what he calls kind of viewing notes. They're actually thick books that appeared in a lot of those Network distributing Blu-ray sets of this series, etc. Mentions the podcast down here. It's kind of just mentioning what they plan to do in the future, if there is any more of these. ITC Noir. Interesting. And here's John Gregson again. Got a little bit dinged up when this came to me, if you notice this bend on the top, sadly. And this is talking about John Creasy and crime fiction and ITC's Gideon's Way. And then here's ITC at a glance, some of the books by J.J. Merrick, but really it's John Creasy. Gideon's Day, Gideon's Night, Gideon's Week, Gideon's March, Gideon's Staff, Gideon's Month, Gideon's Ride, Gideon's Vote. There were more than that. And a lot of the TV episodes, stories were taken from parts of these novels, where Gideon was usually juggling several cases at once. Here's him talking to his wife, and it's the actress playing Gideon's wife and son. And again, over here with Detective Chief Inspector David Keene. That's Alexander Davion playing his right-hand man, kind of a slick, younger playboy version, whereas Gideon is the happily married man, befuddled father figure at home, essentially. Then we have ITC Noir, Lone Wolf. Here's Patrick McGoohan, magnetic screen presence, Patrick McGoohan playing John Drake, secret agent. In the show Danger Man, here's Donald Pleasance, famous character actor Donald Pleasance, familiar to people who are fans of Halloween, as Dr. Loomis in several other movies and TV shows. Obviously Patrick McGoohan, very suave, very stylish. He was approached to play James Bond at one stage, but turned it down because of his moral standards, not wanting to kiss other women that were not his wife. He was a strict Roman Catholic. But in all other ways, he would have been an excellent Bond, very steely and magnetic presence. Talking about his appearance as a bad guy in The Adventures of Sir Lancelot. Some promotional material here. ITC series information book. This is the kind of thing that Jaz Wiseman has a huge catalog of and is able to pull out and use for artwork or behind-the-scenes photos. And, talking about various actresses who worked with McGowan, who's since passed away. And a really good article on this series. Rich Davey, big McGowan fan because he's a big Prisoner fan. He ranks what he considers 6 of the best episodes of the series. ITC and HD. So this is colorist and film restorer Jonathan Wood. And Jonathan Wood is the genius who worked on some BBC properties as well, including remastering their David Suchet Poirot series from ITV and the BBC Miss Marple series, and BBC's Pride and Prejudice from the early 90s. All of these he worked on and restored from 16 millimeter to gorgeous high definition images. And here he has a lot, it's easier in a lot of ways for him to work with ITC material because they were filmed in, most of them, in 35 millimeter. So here's a still from Department S, from The Persuaders, Roger Moore and Tony Curtis. Very fun series. Original film cans used to help restore. ITC first, our network first released these ITC samplers, Retro Action 1, 2, and 3, with an episode of each show, remastered into high definition. Talks about The Persuaders and kind of before and after. Space 1999, Randall and Hopkirk deceased, Department S, right? Ultra high definition test, UHD on the left, HD on the right, or is it the other way around? Can you tell? Actress Rosemary Nichols, who appeared in Department S, very attractive British actress. Hammer House of Horror, Danger Man, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Man in a Suitcase. Jonathan Wood has actually written this long article talking about his experience of restoring all of these series into HD. The Zoo Gang, which has a wonderful theme tune by Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney. Joe 90, very fun series about a young boy who, there's a machine that can basically, it's like the premise of Dollhouse, I guess, in a way, where the boy sits in this machine. He's like a 9-year-old and he gets injected with, or he kind of is input into his brain certain areas of expertise, and he's actually a secret agent who coldly kills some bad guys through the series. A very strange but interesting series, very lovingly done. Super Marionation series from Jerry and Sylvia Anderson. Here's a still from a Baron episode with Steve Forrest. Here's Lou Grade himself again, munching on his cigar. Just doesn't he look like a big mogul of a media empire? A black and white issue talking about moving from black and white to color. ITC shows went to color kind of ahead of the average British television show. Tried to appeal to the American market, who had already went to color predominantly from 1965 television season. Here's a Canadian-produced ITC show, Seaway. Here's the Baron. NBC Peacock. Here's Robin Hood and Sir Lancelot. OSS, Charlie Chan. Several seasons, different shows. William Tell. H.G. Wells' Invisible Man. Some publicity material. All of these are out of Jaz Wiseman's personal archive of memorabilia and behind-the-scenes material and publicity. Here's Craig Stevens, star of Peter Gunn in the States, who went on after that to star in Man with a Camera, kind of globe-trotting photojournalist getting involved in various weird situations and escapades. Here's the Sentimental Agent. Carlos Thompson is the Sentimental Agent, working with, in one episode, an early appearance by Diana Rigg, pre-Avengers Diana Rigg. And again, we're not talking about Marvel's The Avengers here, folks. We're talking about the Avengers, bowler-hatted gentleman, cane-carrying John Steed, and his partner, Mrs. Peel. Very groundbreaking spy series from the 60s. Some Edgar Wallace mysteries, Scotland Yard, lots of different series, TV series and programs that ITC had their hands in. And here is ITC in color. September 67, TV World gave readers In the ATV Midlands region, a tantalizing glimpse of ITC's new color series, The Prisoner, as well as Captain Scarlet and Man in a Suitcase. The Tom Jones Show, Engelbert Humperdinck. The John Davidson Show, lots of different variety shows, play series. Here's McGowan in the Village, The Prisoner. Here's The Champions, the secret agents with superheroic powers. The Saint, of course, Roger Moore going from black and white to color in the first episode of the color seasons of The Saint. The Queen's Ransom with Don Adams with 2 D's, no relation to Don Adams, who played on Gilligan's Island, played Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island, but the same kind of name. And of course, the 2 most successful of these Action Man series for ITC, The Saint, Roger Moore's The Saint, and Patrick McGowan in Danger Man. And then they have some information about the Swashbucklers, talking about kind of a timeline of how things ran. And then here's one of the producers for ITC, Sidney Cole, right? Talking about how he working with Sir Lou Grade, and he worked on several series after ITC, London Weekend Television's Black Beauty, The Adventures of Black Beauty, of course. And Hannah Weinstein, who ran the company Sapphire Films that ITC distributed her Swashbucklers back in the day. Sidney Cole worked on the excellent spy private detective series Man in a Suitcase with Richard Bradford, American Richard Bradford, kind of sauntering around like a, wary panther through the British countryside and getting involved in various hard-hitting cases. That's an excellent show. And here we have a wonderful still of Roger Moore sitting with actress Vera Day, and you'll see the little stick figure of the Saint. Leslie Charteris wrote several Saint novels and stories. They were turned into a radio show starring Vincent Price, several movies starring George Sanders in the 30s and early 40s. And then, of course, its most successful version was not the Val Kilmer movie, which has little resemblance to the stories, but the Roger Moore series from the 60s. And Roger Moore as Simon Templar, St. the Saint, kind of international jewel thief turned adventurer and rescuer of damsels in distress and destroyer of criminal enterprises, evil bad guys, real sense of honor, and always every episode surrounded or starring a beautiful actress. The stick man referring to the Saint calling card there. Here's Sir Lou Grade talking with Roger Moore. This is Roger Moore before he became James Bond, of course. Here's a tie-in, front cover of the Saint ITC series information book, published in 1962, with the little stick figure that was created by Leslie Charteris, the writer himself. And here's Leslie Charteris sitting with some of the behind-the-scenes crew as they plan out the series. He was highly critical of a lot of the scripts, but he did like Roger Moore as the Saint, Leslie Charteris. Guest actress Jane Asher behind the scenes having a cup of tea with Roger Moore. She's deciding to sit on the floor for some reason or on the carpet. Jane Asher, some of you might recall her from appearing alongside Vincent Price and Roger Corman's The Mask of Red Death. Wonderful Edgar Allan Poe adaptation made in the 60s. And ITC at a glance, again here, the Saint American paperbacks. And you'll see several of them. These are the TV tie-in versions. They were originally written by Leslie Charteris, but you'll see Roger Moore on the cover, including him here with Shirley Eaton. The Saint Sees It Through, alias the Saint and Mr. Teal, who is the Scotland Yard inspector who is his kind of frenemy, trying to catch the Saint, who's no longer a criminal in this stage, and sometimes using him to break up criminal organizations. And that's the end of the magazine, and on the back, an advertisement for Network's one of their crowning glories before they closed up shop, releasing Gideon's Way on Blu-ray, complete with the CD and extensive viewing notes. I have this set, and it's wonderful. So that is my little spiel about the various series of ITC. I know some of you will be familiar with at least some of these shows, whether it's the science fiction shows like Space 1999 or U.F.O, or, action adventure espionage shows like Danger Man, The Saint, The Prisoner, etc. Or The Muppet Show. I know we have lots of fans of the Muppets out there, I'm sure. Anyway, very cool magazine, and the previous book I showed, very cool TV programs if you're into that kind of thing. I highly recommend seeking some of the remastered versions out if you're at all a TV on Blu-ray or DVD collector. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you didn't, feel free to ignore it and skip on by. I'm going to cover lots of different things on this channel. Not all fiction, not all pulp fiction, sometimes mysteries, sometimes fantasy, sometimes sword and sorcery, sometimes westerns, sometimes movie and TV books and magazines. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you who check out my videos, leave comments, like, subscribe, all of that. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch my ramblings. Take care, and I'll see you next time.